So you took the skills you'd learned in the CIA and went freelance?
That's basically, yes, that's not basically, that's exactly what I did. I went freelance.
That is the official story. Marty Kaiser is known as the Michelangelo of the bugging business. In his workshop just outside Baltimore, we were given another version of Terpil's resignation from the CIA. Kaiser is a master craftsman who enjoys a reputation for uncompromising honesty. In 1975, he blew the whistle on corrupt middlemen who were costing the FBI millions of dollars in markups on equipment. He has never worked for the government since. But in the previous year, he was the star supplier.
In mid-1974, I received a contract from the CIA to provide equipment to Egyptian intelligence. But what startled me is that this thing was supposedly hush-hush. And Mr. Terpil came in, and he knew the exact dollar volume of the contract, the quantity of each and every item. Shortly after that, he came back to me asking if I would make certain modifications to certain of the products. And I told him that, well, I didn't tell him anything. I just didn't do it because I was bound by contract to provide certain items. So I eventually delivered the contract to the point here in the United States, and then flew to Cairo. I was met at the airport by my host, who took me to the Nile Hilton, and we walked in into the lobby of the Nile Hilton, and sitting there not more than 40 feet in front of me was Frank Terpil. Frank took me to the second floor lounge and introduced me to my CIA contact there, which of course struck me as odd, but everything fits in this world. And then the following day, when I went to meet with the generals and open the equipment, the one general expressed disappointment that the modifications had not been made, making it abundantly clear that Frank had won the confidence of that particular group. So there he was, right smack in the midst of their intelligence agency, moving about with total freedom. And it just absolutely baffled me.
So 2 years after Frank was fired from the CIA, or to be strictly accurate, was forced to resign from the CIA, he seems to have the full confidence of their man in Cairo and the Egyptian military. How's that possible?
Well, the only conclusion I can draw is that he never was fired.
Mr. Colby, in 1974, when you were the director of the CIA, Frank Terpil seemed to be in the center of very important negotiations involving the CIA and Egyptian military. How could he maneuver himself into that position 2 years after he supposedly left the agency?
Well, I guess he could. I mean, agents do maneuver themselves into situations.
Ex-agents?
Ex-agents move, that's the function of an agent in the right thing and in the proper use of the situation, to maneuver themselves into a situation by their own wits and so forth. It's not abnormal at all. Old military types, old diplomats, they all maintain that kind of contact, even though they might have left under some shadow. I really don't know the facts of this case, quite frankly.
Well, the facts are that when you were director of the CIA, Frank Terpil appeared to a CIA supplier to enjoy the full confidence of his CIA contact in Cairo and the Egyptian military.
And I just don't know the circumstances under which it happened, so I really can't comment about it. It's impossible to responsibly say anything.
Has it ever been a practice to appear to fire people from the CIA in order to put them into deep cover?
It's possible, sure. I mean, there are those kinds of things that you used to do years ago. I don't think you do it anymore.
Whatever the reasons, the world suddenly opened up for Frank Terpil after his resignation from the CIA. He described his deals in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and Yugoslavia. His work for Somoza, the Nicaraguan tyrant, for Bokassa, the man who kept the bodies of murdered schoolchildren in the cellars of his palace, for the Shah of Iran, who paid Terpil and his associates $84 million for an elaborate bugging system so that a nervous ruler could spy on his own government and secret police.
This equipment had the capability of listening and identifying all telephone conversations that took place within Tehran itself. Basically, it was a Big Brother operation, a 1984 type operation.
And what was your involvement in this?
We were involved in the most sensitive part, and that was the vetting of his own government.
As Terpil told it, he was associated with the most traumatic events of our time. He had helped to train and equip the Grey Wolves, whose membership included Mehmet Agha, the man who shot the Pope. Were there no times when you felt, I know what's going on here, and I don't want any part in it?
I do not get wrapped up emotionally with the country. I regard myself basically as neutral and commercial.
Sometimes Terpil seemed proud of his deals and connections. At other times, he kept his distance. Do you know Carlos Ramirez Sanchez?
No, I do not.
On the bugged tape of the 17th of December, Gary Corkler, in your presence, offers the undercover agents Carlos the Jackal for a job. Now, was that a lie? Was that just trying to impress them?
Corkler may have said that to impress him.
But not being able to deliver?
Not that I know of.
Do you exaggerate?
On sales, sure, just like everybody.
And do you exaggerate when you're talking about your past experiences?
No, they're all substantiated. I don't have to exaggerate on that. It's usually documented, and I usually have the documents to prove it.
This discussion was to prompt one of the most astonishing experiences of our trip. To back up his claims, Terpil suddenly handed over files of letters and telexes, addresses and phone numbers, to leaders, to manufacturers and shippers, and to his private contacts in Congress, the CIA, the US Special Forces, MI6 and Scotland Yard, all of whom he claimed had assisted him in his years of private practice. Our team telephoned unlisted numbers, visited homes and offices, but none of Terpil's contacts would have anything to do with the film. Occasionally, we were crudely threatened. At other times, we were given detailed corroboration of Terpil's information, on the strict understanding that this was off the record. As soon as we presented our evidence, nobody denied knowledge of Frank Terpil. Broadcasting rules prevent us from recording an interview without the consent of the subject, and the ring of silence might have held had it not been for the 2 court cases against Frank Terpil, which had flushed some of his associates into the open, people who were prepared to corroborate Terpil's claims and appear on film. This man, Kevin Mulcahy, formerly of the CIA, turned state's evidence in a case that is still reverberating throughout Washington. In June 1976, Mulcahy became a partner in Intercontinental Technology, a company with headquarters here at 1612 K Street, Washington. The other 2 partners in ITI were Frank Terpil and a man called Ed Wilson, who impressed Mulcahy with his contacts in official Washington.
Socially, Ed and I met a number of retired individuals from the Central Intelligence Agency, as well as people that were currently employed by the Central Intelligence Agency. We, on more than 3 occasions, we had visited Capitol Hill and met the legislative and administrative assistants to a number of congressmen and senators.
Wilson had served in the CIA and Naval Intelligence. He also owned a 1,500-acre estate in Virginia and was close to men like Strom Thurmond, the ultra-right-wing Republican senator, and Theodore Shackley, then deputy director of the CIA. The question is, why did a man with these connections form a company with Frank Terpil to join the Russians, the East Germans, and the Bulgarians as suppliers to one of the most radical leaders in the Arab world? And how were Wilson and Terpil contracted to export tons of explosives, hundreds of classified night vision devices, and 500,000 detonators out of the United States for delivery to America's supposed arch enemy, Muammar Gaddafi? According to Mulcahy, these questions began to trouble him in the autumn of 1976.
I didn't know whether or not it was a CIA operation, whether it was a legitimate business deal. I just didn't know what the hell was going on.
At what stage did you report your worries to senior people in the CIA?
In September of 1976, I told the FBI and I told the Central Intelligence Agency in gross and dramatic detail. I laid out the cast of characters that were involved in every deal I was privy to. Every company that was involved in the supply end of it. They had, I don't know, unless I'd gone out myself and dropped the body over the transom to the FBI, I don't think they would have done anything with it.
The CIA knew about the operation in Libya in 1976, but nothing was done to stop it until April 1980. Why do you think Terpil and Wilson were allowed to carry on for nearly 4 years?
I have no idea, none whatsoever. It's one of the things that that bothered me enough so that I was willing to go public finally after 4.5 years of silence.
Mulcahy was not the only one to report his concerns to the authorities.
Heel of palm to nose. Hot. Heel of palm to chin. Toe to groin. Hot.
These are the Green Berets, the elite commando corps, at their main training center in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In 1976, Terpil and his cronies were active here, recruiting instructors for Gaddafi. Master Sergeant Luke J. Thompson was approached by one of them.
I was called at my home in Fort Bragg about 7:30 at night by a man who identified himself as Pat Loomis, and he asked if I was free to go abroad to discuss a contract of work in the intelligence field. And not really knowing who he was or anything about him, I had to lead him on to find out some specifics, because I thought he was from some foreign intelligence trying to subvert me. And he asked me if I could recruit a team of 5 people. So as soon as we got through talking, I called the counterintelligence people and made them aware that I was approached by what I felt was a foreign agent. They came over to my house, and the intelligence people told me, said, this is completely legal and above board, so you have no worries. Pursue it as you desire. No problems.
With the apparent approval of counterintelligence and his own commanding officer at Fort Bragg, Luke Thompson took a squad of 5 men with 800 pounds of explosives to Libya. Shortly after his arrival, he was taken to a desert palace where Americans were priming ashtrays, books, even desks to explode on contact. Would you ever use these devices in conventional warfare?
No, it's not something that you would use as a device against an organized force.
What would you use these devices for?
Terrorist activities. Terrorist on unsuspected civilians. Someone that would, would pick up an innocent item through ignorance.
What was Terpil doing out there?
He indicated, he acted like he was chief of the operation.
What, he was running the whole manufacturing facility in the palace?
Yes, he was.
We had one of the outbuildings or the outer buildings as an assembly point, an area of instruction for the assembly of these explosives.
Who were you instructing?
The people we were instructing were Libyan military, which I assume would be their equivalent of special forces.
Were you instructing any guerrilla groups from the outside, like ETA, Red Army, the Red Brigade, the IRA?
If we were not cognizant of it because we never spoke directly to the people.
So you were instructing Libyan military personnel and others whose origins you didn't know?
Which we didn't know, that's true.
I decided, being active duty military, I'd better get out before things get too bad.
Why were you worried?
Well, I could see that this wasn't something that I should be doing. It was obvious that something was wrong. And I decided I'd best burn my bridges and get out. When I got back to the United States, I reported to the counterintelligence people that I had been reporting to all along.
And what did they say to you about your worries?
Obviously something's wrong. This is not an agency operation. So they put it back through the computer again, and they got a block somewhere. The agent told me, he said, we can only get so far up. It blocks.
And what does that mean?
It was stopped.